No debate, no problem. The two candidates for US President go head-to-head in separate town halls. Hello, I'm Anand Naidu, and this is The Heat. President Donald Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden participated in competing town halls on Thursday. The events were scheduled after Trump refused to participate in a virtual debate following his coronavirus diagnosis. With just 18 days to go before the election, polls show the president continuing to trail his opponent nationally and in most of the key battleground states. For more, we turn now to CGTN's White House correspondent Nathan King. So Nathan, two town halls held at the same time. What did we learn?
Well, I mean, you had to have two TVs on, right? And I turned two TVs on the house, and I worked out I was moving from room to room. Then it suddenly reminded me, Anand, of this is like my kids' Zoom lessons. I leave my 13-year-old on his own because I know he can do the work, but I constantly concentrate on the 6-year-old who might wander away or do something worse. And that was kind of like what it was. I mean, you had Joe Biden talking slowly, methodically, dare I say boring. And then you had President Trump repeating solo what he sort of did in the first debate, which is a very combative interview with the NBC host Savannah Guthrie. Now, you know, he did disavow white supremacy, which he didn't do in the first debate, but then he didn't disavow the conspiracy theory of QAnon, which I really don't want to go into and give it more time, but we all know what we're talking about. So it was just quite incredible. I mean, it was difficult to realize you were on the same planet. And, you know, I don't think it may have moved many voters. There's a lot of supporters for President Trump. There's lots of supporters for the Democrats. But it was like living in alternate realities. We just try to put something together for you, just showing the difference. This is on COVID and mask wearing. Let's take a listen.
I'm good with masks. I'm okay with masks. I tell people wear masks. But just the other day, they came out with a statement that 85% of the people that wear masks catch it.
The words of a president matter.
Absolutely.
No matter whether they're good, bad, or indifferent, they matter. And when a president doesn't wear a mask or makes fun of folks like me when I was wearing a mask for a long time, then, you know, people say, well, it mustn't be that important.
I knew it was a big threat. At the same time, I don't want to panic this country. I don't want to go out and say, everybody's going to die, everybody's
Isn't there a middle ground? You don't
no,
have to mislead, but you can...
No.
So you get the difference there. Now, what will it mean for the election less than 3 weeks away? We don't know. What we do know is that the US President, Donald Trump, is widely believed to be behind in the polls. He was meant to sort of catch up. Will this make a difference? I don't know if it will.
Nathan, one other development. We now have more than 18 million people who've already voted. In fact, in the state of Georgia, some voters waited for as long as 11 hours to take advantage of early voting in that state. What does this say about the election?
Well, I can give you some more figures. I mean, over 20 million people have voted in the US ahead of the November 3rd official election date. That is 5 to 6 times more than we saw in 2016. And we're going to get at least another 10 million, maybe even 20 million before election day. What that means is essentially people are taking advantage of it. Why? Well, COVID might be an example. They don't want to line up in long lines. Also, the distrust perhaps in mail-in ballots, which have been spread by the White House behind me as well, might be part of it. And also just the fact there's a lot of enthusiasm for this election as well. Also, you know, we know, for example, that there has been huge amounts of registrations. And I'm not just talking about Democrats here, but also Republicans. Look out for the Republican registrations that we've seen in Pennsylvania, for example. That's very, very interesting. So people are very enthused about this election. Now, what I wouldn't say right now is voter suppression, because, you know, all these counties. And remember, the US is not a federal system when it comes to a presidential election. About 10,000 different jurisdictions are just getting an overwhelming number of people coming in and trying to vote early. So let's wait and see what it means, but what it does mean is that people are voting, and the election is not in less than 3 weeks, as I just said. It's happening now, when it happened last week as well. And that's very interesting, considering both candidates trying to make up ground before November 3rd, but for a lot of people, the election's over.
Thanks, Nathan. That's CGTN's Nathan King reporting. Well, there's much to talk about. Let's get straight to our panel. Joining us here in Washington, D.C. is Rafael Bernal. He covers politics for The Hill newspaper. Steve Chaggaris is an analyst and the political editor for Al Jazeera Online. Hilary Shelton heads the NAACP's Washington Bureau and serves as the Senior Vice President for Advocacy and Policy. And joining us from South Carolina is the host of America This Week on Sinclair Broadcasting, Eric Bolling. Thank you to all of you for being with us. Eric, let me start with you. So, as we heard, the two candidates answered questions in simultaneous but separate town halls at those events on Thursday night. President Trump is trailing in the polls. In fact, one poll has Joe Biden ahead of the president by double-digit figures. So, having watched these town halls, in your view, did the president say or do anything which would have persuaded voters to his side?
I actually don't think he did, Nathan. I think Nathan was right that about 20 million people have voted. Let's point out that's about 15% of what's going to end up voting, because 130 million will vote. I think last night what we saw Savannah Guthrie with a hostile interrogation of the seated president. You flip over to ABC and you watch George Stephanopoulos almost like walking hand in hand along a lake in a sunny fall afternoon with Vice President Biden. It was a tale of two debates separately. Well, it should have been a debate, in fact. If both of them were okay to be in the same room with a debate moderator, with a town hall moderator, why wouldn't they put all three of them together in the debate hall? So I think Trump should probably not have done that. I think Trump went into it thinking that he was going to have a bigger audience, a far bigger audience, and put up a win against Biden. That didn't happen. Biden's audience is about 1 million more than Trump's.
Hilary Shelton, what did you make of it? Do you think that Vice President Joe Biden was treated with kid gloves as opposed to the very combative session that we had with President Trump and the moderator in that debate?
No, I wouldn't say so. I would say that very well, Joe Biden has a very different style. His responses to the moderator's questions were very much in sync along those lines, not combative, wanted to get his point across, making sure the issues were very clear. I think he did a little bit better job of actually saying, I have a plan and here's what it looks like. What I felt with our president, Mr. Trump, is that very well he was laying out very defensive, more personal attack issues, trying to look cool. It was more about personality than it was about issue. So it was a very different approach, I think.
Do you think, Hillary, that President Trump, if there were undecided voters watching, would have persuaded them to vote for him?
No. Again, he's driven by personality. If they were looking for a talk show host or someone like that to be president of the United States, maybe they would have assured themselves that he was the one. But I don't think that's what people are looking for right now. I think people are looking for answers to the questions, to the challenges that are very much before the American people.
There's one question overhanging the American people. It came down from the New York Post the day prior. What happened with Hunter Biden? All these emails that were released. That question was never asked to the vice president. It's a very important question to be asked, and it was ignored.
I will get to that topic a little later in the program, but Hillary, finish what you were saying.
Well, just saying that I think this is still an issue of policy. Our nation is in a really ragged condition right now because of coronavirus and many other things. The unemployment rate continues to plummet in a way that's truly troubling to the American people. The economy, we know, is what it's all about. There have been presidents or candidates in the past that are saying it's about the economy, stupid. But those issues were still not truly addressed by Mr. Trump.
Rafael Bernal, it would have been better, as we've just heard, if this was a debate, but it was two town halls. We have what we have. Did anything stand out for you?
Well, what stood out for me is that President Trump basically he reaped what he sowed. He first didn't agree to the online debate, to the virtual debate, if you will, and he had his reasons. That's fine. But then he cut this deal with NBC after Biden had cut his deal with ABC, and it looked already, NBC was severely criticized for sort of kowtowing to the president, and then he attacked NBC on the day, and he attacked Savannah Guthrie on the day before he went there. So he set the tone, and that tone that he set is the tone that's got him in political trouble right now. It's the same tone that didn't work in the first debate, and he's doing it again, and he doesn't seem to be able to get out of this mode. Mm-hmm. And you see a lot of Republicans, they're starting to run away from him because of that. He seems to be a one-trick pony, a trick that worked fantastically well for them in 2016. It did not work great in 2018, but they had certain calendar advantages in the Senate that they used to very good effect. And now Republicans are seeing that the one thing that Trump gives them, which is winning, well, he's basically run out of that, or it looks like he may have run out of that. And yeah, he paid for it, and he got what he paid for.
Steve Chaggaris, would it be fair to say that the outcome of this election, if we look at the polling, is essentially baked in right now? What we are seeing with these town halls and with the one debate that's going to be coming up is basically the two sides going through the motions.
Yeah, mostly. I mean, what's different between this year and 2016 is there are fewer undecideds. Polling has shown that. There are fewer people who are saying they would consider voting for a third-party candidate. And so the number of people who are considered persuadable voters is much smaller this time around than in 2016. Part of that is you have an incumbent who is running for re-election in Donald Trump, so people know what they're either getting or what they don't want from him. And you have another pretty well-known guy in former Vice President Joe Biden. So the cake is sort of baked in that sense, but there are still a small number of undecideds, persuadable voters. Question is, where are they? Are they in important battleground states, and are they in states in which currently the polling is very close? Places like Florida, which the polling is very, very tight and very important for both of those candidates in terms of their path to 270 in terms of the Electoral College. We don't know, even if it's just a few percentage points in terms of persuadable voters, they're really important persuadable voters to both Biden and Trump. And so every little thing that they do that gets a lot of attention and a lot of and high ratings on TV, those are important for those specific voters. And so while across the country we can say, yeah, there's fewer persuadable voters and the cake may be baked, in certain places it's not totally baked and it's still pretty important.
Eric, as you said earlier on, President Trump's town hall was a lot more combative than the town hall that Joe Biden held. Let's listen to some of the exchange between President Trump and his moderator in that town hall.
Just this week, you retweeted to your 87 million followers a conspiracy theory that Joe Biden orchestrated to have SEAL Team 6, the Navy SEAL Team 6, killed to cover up the fake death of bin Laden. Now, why would you send a lie like that to your followers? You retweeted
That was a retweet. That was an opinion of somebody, and that was a retweet. I'll put it out there. People can decide for themselves. I don't take a position.
You're not like someone's crazy uncle who can just retweet whatever.
Eric, these issues have crept into this election campaign. In the first debate, it was about white supremacy. The president wouldn't condemn white supremacists at that point. We've also heard now him being very ambivalent about this right-wing conspiracy group called QAnon. Why does he keep doing this?
I don't know, and maybe it's because he was successful with it in 2016. I just have to point out how disrespectful Savannah Guthrie was with the President of the United States, calling him some sort of crazy uncle. Let me just take it back through the process again. When Trump said he wasn't going to do a virtual debate, he wanted to be in person. By the way, he's very consistent. I have a town hall with him on Tuesday. He won't do it virtually. We have to go into the White House to do it. So he's very consistent about that. So Biden books his own town hall on ABC. NBC comes and says, Mr. Trump, do you want to do one against Biden at the same time? The NBC world blew up. MSNBC hosts went crazy. Rachel Maddow, Morning Joe, they all went crazy that NBC was going to give that platform to the president while Biden was simultaneously on ABC. So Savannah Guthrie, trying to save face for NBC, went at the president hard, to the point where it was almost unwatchable. If you were undecided or a Trump supporter, you go, that wasn't cool, that was very nice.
Right, to my question, Eric, I mean, things like QAnon and white supremacy, should he come out very clearly and say he condemns them?
I'll give you that, Arnon. I don't know why he doesn't just come out and do it. And I will ask him probably my first question. Can you tell us why you just won't
condemn white supremacy and QAnon theorists, conspiracy theorists. I don't know. Maybe there's some sort of metric within the White House that they think that they don't want to alienate a certain percentage of voters that may be white and undecided. I have no idea, but I think they should.
Hillary, Joe Biden did make some news in his town hall, and that was about the possible expansion of the United States Supreme Court. He said he would give his views on expanding that court before the election. Is that a big issue for voters?
I think for some it is. I mean, those who are very thoughtful of how the Supreme Court's working now, and of course, as we have a Supreme Court nominee being considered for confirmation by the U.S. Senate. So it's on a lot of people's minds, and the questions are being asked. And of course, as we look back on our history, people are surprised to learn that the Supreme Court was not always 9 people, that it has grown. Many people argue consistent with the population growth of the United States. Well, of course, we continue to grow. We have over 300 million people in our country, so deciding how the Supreme Court should be set up makes good sense, at least for us to debate as the American people in our democratic society. Small d, when I say democratic society, along those lines. So I think it's important. It's important that it's being considered. It shows that he's focused on the most powerful judiciary in the United States of America and recognized that perhaps maybe it shouldn't remain just as it is, perhaps maybe, as it's representing the American people, it should be a little bit larger. So I think it's worth conversation, and it's something that all the American people should be part of in this democratic process.
Rafael, there was an exchange between President Trump and Savannah Guthrie, the moderator of the town hall, on the issue of the president's taxes. Let's listen to that.
Are you confirming that, yes, you do owe some $400 million?
What I'm saying is that it's a tiny percentage of my net worth.
That sounds like yes.
And you'll see that soon because we're doing things. You know, we've given, I think it's 108 or 112 pages of financial detail to elections. And, you know, we have to file as the president, as any politician, you have to file.
Rafael, this is a big issue in the media. We've had the New York Times that has already published several stories in its investigation of the president's finances and his taxes. But does this issue have a lot of traction with voters?
It does with many voters, and it really speaks to the issue of the president's believability. Now, there's one thing that he hasn't been able to explain correctly. He keeps talking about being under audit, so he can't release his taxes. And what it seems like he's trying to say is that it would be an unwise strategy for him legally in his fight against the IRS. He's not saying, and if he is saying this, he's lying. He doesn't seem to be saying that he's banned from releasing his taxes. But at some point, he has to gauge what's more important: releasing these taxes, his tax forms from the past, so that people will believe him for the net worth that he says he has, instead of what's been reported that's much lower, and all the evidence that we have is much lower than what he sort of vaguely claims to have, and then, you know, make himself more believable in front of voters.
That's manufactured outrage, Rafael. No one in America cares what Donald Trump's taxes look like. It's manufactured simple. By media types like you.
What he's trying to say is it's bad strategy for him to release his taxes, and that may well be true. It could.
No one under audit releases their taxes. Nobody.
Well, that's not necessarily. No one under audit maybe doesn't go for president. I mean, I don't know. Mitt Romney probably had the. I can't think of anyone.
Want to talk about dishonesty? Let's ask Joe Biden about his son Hunter. What his dealings were with Ukraine.
Speak about manufactured outrage. Okay. That was the weakest story I've seen in a long time. We've all seen that New York Post story was basically bunk.
Okay, I will get to.
You think the Hill has put together a more substantive story than the New York Post story on Hunter Biden and Joe Biden in Ukraine?
Well, we did actually.
Okay, I will get to Hunter Biden in a moment, as I said. Steve, I want to bring you in here. As we heard earlier on, 20 million Americans have voted. And, you know, the conventional view is that this high number favors the Democrats. There's also a view that there's going to be a record turnout this election that also favors the Democrats. Is that the case? Do you think that will favor the Democrats, the early turnout?
Well, early turnout definitely favors Democrats, but it does every year. It just happens to be that there are more people voting early this year, mainly because the rules have changed because of the pandemic. There are more opportunities for people to vote early, whether that's by mail-in or states changing their in-person early voting situation. But traditionally, Democrats do get out and vote earlier. And I think the trap that people fall into is they see these numbers of early voters, they see Democratic enthusiasm in terms of the early voter number, but it doesn't take into consideration that Republicans generally tend to vote on the day of the election. And so at the end of the day, we're going to have to really see what turnout is among specific demographics that are beneficial to each side, whether in terms of 2016, for instance, in which Hillary Clinton was unable to turn out younger voters in the same numbers as Barack Obama was, African-American voters in the same numbers that Barack Obama was. In terms of white working class voters, they not only turned out in higher numbers, but a lot of them switched their votes from Obama to Trump. So those numbers we don't know those numbers now. You're not going to get those numbers from any kind of early voting statistic. We'll get it at the end of the day when the votes are counted.
All right, Eric, let's talk about something that you want to talk about, and that is Hunter Biden. There was that story that broke in the New York Post this week about Joe Biden's son, Hunter, and we know that he received a very handsome payoff from the Ukrainian gas company, Burisma. But, there's a lot of debate, as we just heard a moment ago, about the veracity of the story that was in the New York Post, whether it did happen, whether it didn't happen, whether it was a plant, whatever the case may be. But I think there was a bigger story that broke after that, which was the fact that Twitter blocked all posts because it said that the material in that story was allegedly hacked. It's a complicated story, as we know, and we won't go into the merits of what was reported, but what do you make of Twitter's actions?
Well, here's what happened. They not only blocked the actual post, so you couldn't even open a link of that story, they also blocked many people who posted that, including the White House press secretary. She was actually pulled off Twitter. President Trump said, we're going to look into this. This is not right. Ajit Pai, the head of the FCC, said, I'm going to look at this. It's called Rule 230. We won't go into it. But it's kind of a wall between the social media companies and their liability. So they're going to say, are they operating under false pretenses? So once that happened, Jack Dorsey, the founding chairman of Twitter, said, we made a mistake, and he walked back what they had done. Mm-hmm. So I believe Twitter is in an active role silencing some things that are counterproductive for Joe Biden and his campaign.
Rafael, do you believe that to be the case?
I don't. I believe that they probably did go overboard blocking that link. There are a lot of weak stories. This is a thinly sourced story. They didn't really bother to check whether that information was accurate, whether where Giuliani actually got it, and so on. But it's not, to my understanding, hacked information, and more so, if, as it seems, it's not actually Hunter Biden's computer that we're talking about, it's made up information, not hacked information. And as far as I know, Twitter doesn't have a policy against fiction, even if it's passed as fact. So yeah, I think Twitter definitely went overboard.
Right, because Twitter didn't do the same when the infamous Steele dossier came out.
Right, for example.
Hilary, let's move on. Let's talk about Joe Biden's record on race. He's told us during this election campaign that he was arrested while visiting Nelson Mandela. He says he also took part in civil rights marches. We know that those were lies. He also, at one time, when he was nominated with Obama to be Obama's vice president, he said the president, or the candidate president at that time, was articulate, bright, and clean. Is this going to pose any problems for him, these kinds of comments with African-American voters?
Well, I think we're listening to those comments, but they'll be looking at his record, I think, even more so in the U.S. Senate. Mm-hmm. The NAACP and other organizations have worked with Joe Biden on many issues in his role on the Senate Judiciary Committee, from judicial nominees to also issues like racial profiling, issues of voting rights, violence against women are all issues that he worked on very much. So if we were going to look at his record, and in terms of his voting record on Capitol Hill, you will see a continuous pattern of supporting racial and ethnic minority issues that are important to the American people and certainly the communities we serve.
94 crime bill, Hillary. 94 crime bill. How do you get over that?
Well, let me say that we do have to talk about that as a problem. He and even Bill Clinton have admitted the problems that they had with the 94 crime bill. Oh, no question about it. But let me talk about that in the terms of how we're comparing him to Donald Trump. So indeed, I would say that is a big problem, but I will also say that as we look at issues that were also important, as reauthorization of the Voting Rights Act, and making sure the provisions were very much in place.
You said look at his voting record, and look at his history, and look at his path over the 47 years in the Senate. that is a beacon screaming out a major problem for him, and no one seems to want to ask him about it.
Well, they should ask him about it, but I can speak very specifically to his voting record with the NAACP.
Yeah.
As you know, the
Hilary,
NAACP's done a voting record to cover all the Senate going back to 1914. So every year he was in the Congress, we graded him on the things he did and, quite frankly, the things he didn't do. So a fair view means taking a look at everything he's done. If you ask him about the crime bill, no question about it. There are a lot of people that made big mistakes on that crime bill. Again, no question about it. But if you look at some of the other issues as well, you have to balance that out too. Now let's compare that to the person he's running against. We want to stay on record and on schedule, and that is we want to compare him to Donald Trump. How is Donald Trump done on racial issues as well in the United States? Let me just say he keeps very bad company.
Steve Chaggaris, President Trump's performance and his record is on the ballot in this election. It will effectively be a referendum on his term in office. But let's look at Joe Biden for a moment. We've been talking about Joe Biden here. He's been a politician for almost 50 years. What are his major accomplishments?
Well, he served in the Senate for many, many years, was Obama's vice president. Look, he's a guy who is selling himself as somebody who can bring both sides together. And that's what he has argued that he did in the Senate for many, many years. He argues that that's one of the reasons why that Obama brought him on as his running mate. In terms of specific accomplishments, you let the campaigns hash that out. But really what this has turned out to be, and I think to Trump's detriment and I think to his dismay, is it's really turned, as you said, it's turned out to be a referendum on the Trump presidency. And no matter how hard he's tried to flip the script about Joe Biden as a creature of Washington for 47 years, as somebody who's not mentally with it to be president of the United States, as somebody who is more crooked now than Hillary Clinton that he's arguing. These are the types of things that he's trying to paint Joe Biden with. We'll see if it works in the last 18, 17 days here. But for now, what we've seen, at least the polling has shown, is this really is become a referendum on Donald Trump's presidency and how he's handled the presidency. And at the end of the day, it seems as if Trump will only succeed if he can successfully turn people off to Joe Biden at this point.
Okay, and that's where we have to leave it. Thanks to all of you for being with us. That's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for joining us.